Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV. Additional funding for this program is provided by North Carolina's Eastern Region.
That's just like New Bern. There really is a connection.
Very proud of that ancestry, that Swiss ancestry.
The spirit of togetherness is definitely there.
More than half of New Bern's original settlers came from here. With its centuries-old landscape, steep hillsides and bustling cobblestone streets, Switzerland's capital city doesn't seem like it would have anything in common with a city nearly 5,000 miles away in eastern North Carolina. But the ties between these towns run deep. It all begins with their names.
The spirit of togetherness is definitely there. I mean, Bern, Switzerland, and New Bern, North Carolina, you can't beat that, even though the architecture might be quite different.
It's a connection that goes back 300 years. That's when Baron Christopher de Graaff and Reid left Switzerland and eventually landed on the banks where the Neuse and Trent rivers converge. He named the spot New Bern in honor of his hometown.
By the end of September of 1710, there was a colony here. It was a colony that had to be engaged in survival because they had to establish themselves.
It was a struggle in the early years, but the colony did establish itself, and today New Bern is North Carolina's second oldest city. To honor the town's tricentennial, a group of New Bernians is traveling to the place where their city's history began.
The connection is really much deeper, in my opinion, and a lot more emotional than you would ever guess.
There's a big difference in climate and scenery to greet the group members as they arrive in Switzerland. The Swiss have rolled out a dusting of snow as a region-wide welcome mat, along with more traditional greetings.
Welcome to the original, welcome to Old Bern.
A city that traces its origins to 1191.
Sort of leaves you speechless because it was the beauty of it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful city.
With a classic European look and feel that come across right away.
It is a very, very old city, one that makes New Bern look like it was built only yesterday.
In its early days, Bern didn't have a name at all. Soon after, the city's founder, Duke Berchtold of Zeringen,
decided to go on hunt. And he said the first animal we are going to kill shall give the name to the city. And that was obviously a bear.
Or Bern in German, the city's official language. More than 800 years after the original bear gave Bern its name, the animal still gives the city an identity. Bears are on the prowl all over the place, printed on license plates, waving on flags, even standing on pedestals.
The bears are everywhere, and we look back and think, that's just like New Bern. There really is a connection. There really is something that started from something and not just out of someone's imagination.
Back in the late 1800s, New Bern adopted the coat of arms and symbol of its mother city, and the bears have been fixtures across town ever since. Seeing them on the other side of the Atlantic in their original location is special.
It's kind of exciting because I've lived in New Bern for 30 years of my life, and going to Bern, Switzerland, and they've got it on their doorbells, they've got it on their front doors. You just see it everywhere.
You also see the face of world-famous physicist Albert Einstein, who developed some of his breakthrough theories when he lived in this Bern apartment in the early 1900s. Many of Bern's 130,000 people get around using its modern transportation system of electric streetcars and buses, but they also do plenty of walking from place to place. The city features 3 miles of arcades, giving shoppers and commuters alike a covered place to cover some ground when the weather's not so good. Like New Bern, the city of Bern is positioned on a peninsula. But instead of the Neuse and the Trent rivers, Bern has the river Arta. It's an immensely popular attraction, especially in the summer months when thousands of people come out here, walk a mile upstream, then float back downstream. It's such a popular tradition. In fact, there are special staircases to help you get out when you're done swimming. If sweets are more your speed, Bern has plenty of fine chocolate to offer its visitors. Between Toblerone chocolate and Pepsi Cola, both Bern and New Bern are birthplaces of world-famous sweet treats. As you would expect in a Swiss city, timepieces of all sizes are on display everywhere, but the clock tower in the center of Bern is one of the city's most popular attractions.
This is a purely mechanical clockwork, a hand-winded clockwork. So there is no electricity in it and electronics. It starts every full hour, 3 minutes before the full hour, with the song or the caw of the rooster.
Then the jester strikes little bells.
And at the same time, the bears down below, they turn around like a merry-go-round.
Soon after, Cronus, the Greek god of time, turns over his hourglass and moves his wand.
So when this is over, then the rooster, he crows for a third time, and then finished for an hour.
The clock's one of many conversation points as the people of Bern welcome the group from North Carolina. This is an official visit to Switzerland, but all the members of the delegation are paying their own travel expenses.
I thought about what's the difference between Bern and New Bern. We are older than you, founded in 1191, you're in 1710.
Celebrating that tricentennial is a big reason behind this visit, and making sure the people of Bern know they're invited to share in it too.
We are very proud, I want to tell you that, of being the daughter city of Bern, Switzerland. I'd like to invite all of you over.
To show their solidarity and celebrating their shared history, the two cities have collaborated on a major exhibit at the Bern History Museum.
New Bern's anniversary is an ideal opportunity for Bern to celebrate with New Bern.
The visiting New Bernians are among the first to see the exhibit, which will be on display in Bern for 6 months.
It's very, very exciting to be here. Right at the entrance, they have Bern flags on one side and New Bern flags on the other. It's pretty neat to know that we are a part of this and this exhibit.
300 years after Christopher de Graaff and Reid left Switzerland to settle New Bern, his family remains an important part of Swiss society, especially in Bern, the Swiss capital. In German, the last name changes to von Graaff and Reid, but the legacy is the same. Many of the folks from New Bern have picked up on the connection.
There's a real feeling of kinship and interest, particularly with the de Graaff and Reid family. You get the impression that they feel a somewhat parental interest in us.
One of the many reasons the de Graaff and Reids and others have been a driving force behind the Bern New Bern exhibit.
We wanted to honor and portray New Bern and Old Bern, but we also wanted to elaborate a common project. Until now, the exchanges that took place between the two Berns were very punctual visits. Somebody would go over and it was very nice to see you and come goodbye and come back, and that was it. But this time we are really working together.
And they have been for some time.
How they did the research and have these pictures that are projected on these walls is by itself a 4-year effort.
The result is an 11 display exhibit that tells the Bern New Bern story with a special blend of Swiss and American perspectives. It all begins with a look at the drought, hard economic conditions, and religious persecution in Switzerland that prompted dozens of people to join de Graaff and Reid on the journey to the New World.
He was one of those whose imagination was probably captured by the idea of the New World. He was very interested in developing a Swiss colony in North Carolina.
The walls feature a series of paintings and maps showing what the New World looked like when the settlers landed there. There's also a diorama of de Graaff and Reid's conflict with the Native American tribes.
The Tuscarora Indians are leaning over Christopher de Graaff and Reid. That is in 3D and realistic and sort of caught my eye.
De Graaff and Reid survived the encounter and later returned to Switzerland. But the colony he established continued, and the Bern New Bern exhibit tells that story too, with accounts of the Civil War and New Bern's economic development afterward.
Pepsi Cola was invented over there.
Yes.
So exciting stories.
That resonate with the Swiss people who are checking out the exhibit. Pepsi is very familiar to the Swiss, and there's a display of its origins in New Bern. If you're saying to yourself, this all looks so interesting, I wish I could come to Switzerland and see it for myself. Turns out you don't have to. Most of these exhibits will be crossing the ocean and coming to New Bern in the summer of 2010. The exhibit is a way for the people of Bern to show their appreciation for New Bern as the city celebrates its 300th birthday. The gesture hasn't gone unnoticed.
I sat there and felt the pride boil up inside me. I thought it was magnificent.
Concluding the exhibit are a video and a series of photographs to show visitors what New Bern looks like today. Seeing elements of their culture thriving in the United States is exciting to the people of Bern.
It's something new. I guess not everybody knows that New Bern exists in United States.
Changing that mentality is a major motivation behind the exhibit.
That's one of the objectives that we were pursuing, to make New Bern known in Old Bern. After all, New Bern is the eldest Swiss settlement in the United States, and after all, New Bern is the only official daughter city of Old Bern.
One of the reasons, perhaps, that the group from New Bern is drawing so much attention from Swiss media outlets of all stripes. The delegation's arrival is front-page news.
That showed that we weren't just ordinary representatives, so to speak, to them. We really do represent an important part of America, of their heritage.
A story that's being told on both sides of the Atlantic. In addition to the coverage here in Bern, have been stories from Swiss journalists like Reid, who traveled to North Carolina to report on New Bern.
I think it's kind of important for the people of Switzerland to think about those older times, to reconsider what it means when you have to emigrate, when you have to leave your country and go up to new shores.
Now that the visitors from New Bern have seen Christopher de Graaff and Reid's castle in painted color, it's time to see the place in living color.
This castle has a long history dating back to the 11th century.
The castle is in an area called Vorb, just outside of Bern, and it was already more than 600 years old when de Graaff and Reid lived here in the 1600s and 1700s.
It is not make-believe, it is not a tourist attraction, it's the real thing.
Much of the castle remains exactly the way it would have been during his time. It's of particular interest to us to know that we're seeing essentially what he saw. It's wonderful, just particularly when you consider those times, to think that someone from this setting would have ended up on the banks of the Neuse River.
In 1713, historians say, de Graaff and Reid left North Carolina and returned here to Vorb, a place that offers exceptional views of the Swiss Alps. It's a solid 6.5-hour drive to get from New Bern to the mountains of North Carolina, but from the original Bern, an hour's drive gets you to some of the most beautiful mountain peaks in the entire world. An hour's drive and 4 cable car rides, that is. Mount Shieldhorn's peak can't be seen from the base, but a 1,000-foot waterfall gives a stunning preview of the splendor to come.
I spent the first 5 years of my life in the North Carolina mountains, so I've always enjoyed the mountains when I've had an opportunity to go there. And this is just so spectacular to know that we have mountains, but these are really high mountains.
Something that becomes even more clear as the gondola to the top gets going and climbs higher and higher to the summit.
This is magnificent. This is one of the prettiest views you can ever imagine. It's all mountains all around you. You feel like you really are at the top of the world.
And that's inspiring some folks to use the top of their lungs. The Shieldhorn stands at 10,000 feet, surrounded by other alpine peaks like the Eiger and the Jungfrau. It's a much more crowded landscape than the Appalachians and other American mountain chains.
What's particularly striking is the sharpness and the raggedness of the mountains, and it's just plainly gorgeous.
On a 10-point scale, a 20. It's like looking at a Renaissance painting with the light and the shade.
Which could have easily been pea soup conditions this time of year.
I think most of the time here that we'd be in clouds now, overcast,
But this is wonderful, beautiful.
Beautiful enough to be a movie location, actually, something that happened here in 1969. Dozens of scenes from James Bond's On Her Majesty's Secret Service were shot here at the Shieldhorn, something that's still reflected 40 years later. The film features several ski chase scenes, and on this day it's still easy to see how seriously the Swiss take their skiing at any age. Back down at lower elevations, the first snowfall of the season is slowly dripping away. But the melting process is in full effect inside this Swiss restaurant. Fondue is served.
It's a wonderful experience to be able to do this in Switzerland.
Because it's the Swiss who first produced the marriage of melted cheese and bread that's famous around the world.
I love cheese. Cheese and good bread is my passion.
And both are at their best here in the Emmental region of Switzerland, just outside of Bern.
We went through the fondue period, and I used to do that a lot, and I love that. And so that was a real special treat.
The fondue was wonderful, and it's especially wonderful because we watched the whole process of how it was made.
An endeavor that begins with a herd of red Holsteins, some of whom are happier to see a camera than others. They're all on a strict diet. Taste is critical to the finished product they'll help create.
Our cows here are not allowed to eat silage. No alfalfa, no corn silage, that's forbidden because there can be a bad bacteria and that would spoil the cheeses.
The dairy produces several varieties of a cheese known as Emmental, named for the region where it was created. Visitors can see it at every stage, a liquid vat, a solid wheel, and of course, the steamy serving pot. Now, you may be asking yourselves, what in the world is this Emmental cheese that everyone talks about? I've never heard of it before. Well, you have tasted it before because what's called Emmental cheese here in Switzerland is called Swiss cheese back in the States, and let me tell you, it's even better. But don't take my word for it. UNC-TV's resident food aficionado Bob Garner isn't on this journey to Switzerland. But his first cousin Nelson McDaniel is.
Good.
The dairy uses modern cheese-making equipment, but visitors can still see how one of Switzerland's signature products was created a century ago by fire in a copper vat. These days, after the cheese cubes are separated from the water, they're put in a hoop to dry, and all the remaining liquid is forced out.
Then the cheeses are so dry and hard that we can take them out and we place them on a rack.
After that, the aging process is off and running.
That I find very fascinating, how they go from one room to the next and watch it and turn it.
The warming and cooling cellars no doubt contribute to the taste, but much of that was determined at the very beginning.
The flavor you get from what the cows are eating, so this natural grass, it's just a natural cheese. We don't pasteurize the milk, we don't add any flavor or color stuff.
But the cheesemakers do add a few enzymes and a couple of types of good bacteria. The interaction creates a carbonic acid gas that expands, forming the cheese's iconic holes in the process.
It makes this cheese unique. That's just the one and only who has got these holes, and that's the Emmental cheese.
The New Bernians are wrapping up their visit to Emmental with full stomachs for sure, but their minds are in consumption mode too. Many of the Swiss settlers who left for New Bern with Christopher de Graaff and Reid 300 years ago were farmers in this part of Switzerland.
I have ancestors from here, from the Emmental, and I'm very proud of that ancestry, that Swiss ancestry. It just heightens my awareness of who I am, who they were.
There are plenty of reasons to include a stop in Germany as part of any European visit, but this trip has extra significance to the city of New Bern. This is known as the Palatine Region of Germany, and more than half of New Bern's original settlers came from here.
It made sense at the same time that we would recognize not only those Swiss who came, but also come up into this Palatine area to recognize and pay our respects to those early Palatine families.
Before Christopher de Graaff and Reid and the Swiss left Bern, the German Palatines were leaving England. In January of 1710, John Lawson led more than 600 of them on a journey to North Carolina, a voyage that would take them 13 weeks. It wasn't until late July of 1710 that de Graaff and Reid and about 100 Swiss set sail for the New World. They made it to New Bern twice as fast as the Palatines and with nowhere near the devastation.
The Palatines had a very difficult voyage. They died at the rate of an average of 4 a day, and so of the 650 Palatines who left England, 300 arrived in New Bern.
Since England controlled North Carolina in those days, de Graaff and Reid needed permission to settle there. He got that blessing by agreeing to take the Palatines with him in an arrangement with the Queen of England.
She was very interested in German Palatines who had migrated to England to escape persecution. They were Protestants, and she had a lot of them living in refugee camps in London.
As the group from New Bern sees the rivers the Palatines sailed on and the cities they lived in, they can't help but think about the hardships of heading to the New World.
Life was so difficult, and I just have to marvel at the resiliency of people who eventually left and went to a better life.
New Bern was founded by Swiss and Germans, but other Europeans soon settled in.
Within a few years, the population of the town was primarily of English descent and Scots descent, but a few of those Palatine and Swiss families held on and remained represented.
A name familiar to many of us who live in eastern North Carolina is IPOC, and the IPOC name is a German Palatine name, I believe, and it was originally Eibach, E-I-B-A-C-H, and it became anglicized to IPOC. And there are other place names in the area. Simmons Street. Simmons was a Swiss name.
Back in Germany, the cities of the Palatine region have lots to offer the visitors from New Bern. Journeys along the Mosel River are filled with steep vineyards that produce the main ingredient for Riesling. Dozens of castles come into view quickly along the Rhine River. Cathedrals are central to cities in this part of Germany, as they are in places across Europe. The Romanesque cathedrals of Speyer, Mainz, and Worms all date back more than 800 years. Structures that seem new compared to what the group's finding in the German city of Trier, which was founded about 17 BC. Several ruins from the Roman era are still in place in Trier, including an amphitheater and imperial baths, which all trace back to the 2nd century. There's also the Porta Nigra, once part of the city wall around Trier. The New Bernians are also making a brief foray into France, Strasbourg to be specific. Back in the 1700s, historians believe a man from here in Strasbourg named Claude Joseph Sautier came to North Carolina and made a lasting impact in several places, including Tryon Palace.
We've been able to compare handwriting and some other drawing details with the fortification maps that we know are by Sautier. So I think everyone feels fairly certain that he did the original garden plan for Tryon Palace.
Like hundreds of cities and towns across France and Germany this time of year, Strasbourg is home to a vibrant Christmas market. It's an especially elaborate affair here, complete with baccarat chandeliers dangling over the streets. There are much lower-priced ornaments and other Christmas decorations for sale at Christmas markets, and St. Nick's certainly holds court, apparently with no age limit.
They celebrated a lot more here. The markets are fantastic. Where in the States, you just go into the stores and they celebrate Christmas. Here, the entire village gets into it.
Most of them with mugs of hot wine in hand.
It's a mulled spiced wine, and it warms you up in a hurry.
And it adds to a most unique Christmas experience, thousands of miles away from home.
It's kind of like the local county fair or the state fair. There's lots to eat and people are enjoying themselves. So it's very similar, except it has a Christmas theme.
In looking at Strasbourg and the other cities, how they've decorated for Christmas, it would just be wonderful if we could carry some of that back to New Bern.
One of many European experiences the visitors plan to bring home with them.
We've been transplanted. We came from here, we went over there, and we should be proud of the fact that we are from this part of the world. Knowing our roots better, I think, should strengthen us.
Well, I can hardly wait to tell my grandchildren all about this and to tell them what a special feeling there is between Bern and New Bern, and I hope it will make them want to visit Bern someday and make them more aware of what New Bern's history is.
A history that's marking a milestone, and at a time when one of New Bern's own residents occupies North Carolina's highest office.
The 300th is a big deal, and North Carolina does not have many big deals like this. This whole relationship, the whole fact of Bern, Switzerland being a part of New Bern's history has been solidified and actually personified. We all understand the bear. We all understand the 300th.
That's especially true for the 34 New Bernians who now have a much deeper understanding of their city's origins.
It's given us not only a look into some beautiful places, beautiful countryside, beautiful architecture, but also a little deeper meaning that corresponds with us in New Bern. Finding our roots, bringing them home.
And there's also something much more tangible crossing the Atlantic. So far, New Bern's 300th celebration has inspired more than 100 Swiss to make the journey westward in 2010.
I'm looking forward to a lot of people from Bern coming over and seeing what they created or what they founded over 300 years ago.
The story of Bern and New Bern continues online at unctv.org/Bern.
Quality public television is made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV. Additional funding for this program is provided by North Carolina's Eastern Region.